I still remember the exact moment the nurse handed me the discharge papers. The paper was warm from the printer, smelling faintly of toner and hospital antiseptic. My triple bypass scars were still pink and tender under the bandages, but the cardiologist had signed off, stable enough to go home. Home. The word felt like medicine itself after 23 days in Phoenix General. My son David was supposed to pick me up at 11 a.m. He texted at 10:47, running late, traffic. Karen will come instead. Karen, my daughter-in-law of 8 years, had always been polite in that polished, rehearsed way. Pearly smile, perfect blowout, voice like warm honey over broken glass. When she arrived, she wasn't alone. 2 orderlies followed her pushing an empty wheelchair. They said you needed help to the car, she explained, eyes flicking to my 4 bruises. I nodded, too tired to argue. But instead of the parking garage, she directed them toward the East Wing elevators. Shortcut, she said. We descended to B2, loading dock level. A black SUV idled there, windows tinted so dark they looked like voids. David sat in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. Change of plans, Mom, he said without turning. We're taking you somewhere safe. I laughed, actually laughed, because it had to be a joke. The pain meds made everything feel slightly unreal anyway. It wasn't a joke. They drove me 40 minutes north to a place called Sunrise Memory Gardens. The sign promised compassionate care for all stages. The front desk nurse smiled like she'd been practicing in a mirror. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes? We've been expecting you. Your son already completed the paperwork. I looked at David. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Paperwork? My voice sounded small, childlike. Karen handed over a thick folder. On top, a durable power of attorney dated 3 days before my surgery. I'd signed it in pre-op haze while a nurse held the pen steady because my hands shook from anxiety. David had told me it was just in case, medical decisions only. The document said otherwise. It included financial authority, property management, and, buried in Clause 17, guardianship petition rights if incapacity was declared. They declared it. The intake nurse asked gentle questions I barely answered. Blood pressure, medications, next of kin. When she asked if I felt safe at home, Karen answered for me, she's been very confused lately. Talking about people who aren't there, I tried to protest. My voice cracked. A security guard appeared at the doorway, polite but large. David finally spoke. Mom, it's temporary. Just until you stabilize. The house needs updates. Karen's handling it. Updates. They left me there with one small duffel bag containing 3 changes of clothes, my reading glasses, and the gold locket my late husband Paul gave me on our 40th anniversary. No phone, they said screen time isn't good for recovery. No wallet. No keys. That first night I lay in the narrow bed listening to the soft beeps of monitors down the hall and the occasional sob from the room next door. Sunrise Memory Gardens wasn't a nursing home. It was the locked memory unit. Keypad doors. No outside lines from resident phones. Visiting hours 2 to 4 p.m. daily. I was prisoner in a pastel prison. The next morning a social worker came with more forms. Your son mentioned possible early dementia signs, she said kindly. We can start the evaluation process. I stared at her. I had heart surgery. Not Alzheimer's. She nodded like she'd heard it before. Many families struggle with acceptance. I didn't sleep the second night either. On the 3rd day Karen arrived during visiting hours carrying a bakery box, lemon squares, my favorite. She set them on the windowsill like an offering. We listed the house, she said casually, as if discussing the weather. Phoenix market is insane right now. 4 bedrooms, paid off, corner lot, bidding war already. My house. The one Paul and I bought in 1982 when David was still in diapers. The one where we planted the jacaranda tree that still bloomed purple every May. The one where Paul died peacefully in our bed while I held his hand. David refinanced last week, she continued, pulled out $340 in equity for modifications. New roof, HVAC, accessibility ramps. You know, future-proofing. I felt the room tilt. You used my money, while I was in ICU? She shrugged. Someone had to make decisions. You were sedated for days. I looked at the lemon squares. My stomach turned. That evening I asked the night nurse if I could make a phone call. She hesitated, then said, "Family has to approve external contacts right now." Family. I lay awake planning. I had one card left, my sister Margaret in Tucson. Retired forensic accountant. Paul always called her the bloodhound because once she caught a scent, she never let go. If I could just get one message to her. By day 5 I understood the routine of captivity disguised as care. Breakfast at 7:30, oatmeal that tasted like library paste. Group activities at 9, memory circle, where we were encouraged to share fond recollections while the activities director wrote keywords on a whiteboard. I said nothing. They marked me as withdrawn. Lunch at noon. Bingo at 1:30. Nap time. Snack. Dinner. Lights out at 9. The residents were a mix, some genuinely confused, some medicated into docility, a few like me, wrongfully warehoused. I befriended Mrs. Alvarez in room 112, 89, sharp as a tack, placed there by a grandson who wanted her condo. She whispered during movie night, "They take your phone, your glasses, your dignity. But they can't take your mind unless you let them." She was right. On day 7 Karen returned. This time she brought swatches, fabric squares and shades of taupe and sage. "We're redoing the living room," she explained brightly. New curtains. The old ones were so dated. I pictured her standing in my house, measuring my windows while nurses measured my blood pressure. "Did you at least keep Paul's recliner?" I asked. She hesitated. "We donated some furniture. Made space. Donated." My throat closed. Paul's recliner was where he read bedtime stories to David. Where he proposed renewing our vows on our 25th. Where he took his last breath. I forced calm. "What about my files? The trust papers?" Karen's smile tightened. "David's handling all that, don't worry." I worried. That night I slipped Mrs. Alvarez a note scribbled on a napkin, "Call Margaret Ruiz, Tucson. 520 star. Tell her Eleanor Hayes, Sunrise Memory Gardens, emergency." She palmed it like a pro. Next morning she told me the payphone in the staff break room was accidentally left unattended during shift change. Mrs. Alvarez made the call. 2 days later Margaret arrived. She came during visiting hours wearing her lawyer face, severe bun, navy blazer, briefcase that looked like it could double as a battering ram. Karen and David weren't there. Margaret sat across from me in the sad little family room and listened without interrupting while I told her everything. When I finished she said only, "They used the medical POA to trigger guardianship. But Paul was smarter than they think." She pulled out a single sheet from her briefcase. Paul's Revocable Living Trust, executed 2015. Successor trustee if I was incapacitated more than 60 consecutive days, Margaret Ruiz. Not David. not Karen. Margaret. And Clause 9, b. Any attempt to transfer, encumber, or dispose of the primary residence without express written consent of both original grantors or the named successor trustee shall be deemed presumptively fraudulent and subject to immediate injunction. David never read the fine print. Margaret had already filed an emergency petition in probate court to terminate the guardianship and freeze all transactions on my accounts. She also requested an accounting of every dollar moved since my admission. "They're panicking," she said. "I had a process server deliver notice to your house yesterday." David answered the door. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Good. That night I slept for the first time in weeks. The court hearing was set for 11 days after Margaret's visit. In the meantime, Sunrise Memory Gardens became noticeably colder. My activities privileges were temporarily suspended for noncompliance. Meals arrived late. My blood pressure medication was delayed twice, enough to make my head pound but not enough to kill me. Coincidence? I thought not. Margaret visited every third day, bringing updates like battle reports. First discovery: David had opened a home equity line of credit 3 days after my surgery, $340,000 drawn within 48 hours. Destination? An account titled Hayes Renovation Fund LLC, registered to Karen's maiden name. Second, the house was under contract. Cash buyer. Closing scheduled in 17 days. Purchase price, $1.28 million. Third, and worst, the refinance paperwork included an appraisal dated while I was still intubated. The appraiser? Karen's cousin, licensed in Nevada but working Arizona deals. Margaret subpoenaed phone records. Texts between Karen and David the day of my surgery. Karen, sedation started. We have 48 to 72 hour window. David, appraiser coming tomorrow. Told him urgent Reno consult. Karen, pull the max. We need deposit for the flip property on 7th Avenue flip property. They weren't just taking my house. They were using my equity to buy distressed homes, renovate cheaply, and flip, exactly what Karen's family did in Reno before they moved to Phoenix. Margaret found 4 other seniors in the last 18 months who suddenly needed guardianship after heart procedures. Same refinance company. Same appraiser cousin. Same pattern. On the morning of the hearing, David and Karen arrived together. David wore the suit I bought him for his law school graduation. Karen had my sapphire earrings, the ones Paul gave me for our 30th. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s. Margaret presented the trust document, medical timeline, bank records. David's attorney argued good faith actions during medical crisis. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Hayes, do you wish to speak?" I stood slowly, still weak but steady. I signed a medical power of attorney. Not permission to steal my home. Not permission to lock me in a memory unit so they could measure my windows for new curtains. A ripple went through the courtroom. The judge granted the emergency termination of guardianship. Ordered immediate release from Sunrise, froze all accounts and the pending house sale. Appointed a receiver to oversee my finances pending full accounting. David stared at the floor. Karen's face went white. As I walked out, escorted by Margaret and a sheriff's deputy, David whispered, "Mom, please. We can fix this." I didn't answer. I moved back into my house 3 days later. The smell hit first: new paint, Karen's vanilla candle, unfamiliar laundry detergent. The living room curtains were gone. Bare windows stared back like empty eyes. Paul's recliner was missing. Margaret had arranged round-the-clock security until the receiver took over. 2 off-duty deputies parked outside. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit arrived 5 days later. They had been quietly building a case after Margaret tipped them off. The pattern was too clear: elderly heart patients, sudden complications, prolonged hospital stays, rapid guardianship, equity stripping. They executed search warrants at my house, Karen's parents' condo in Scottsdale, and David's office. In the garage they found boxes labeled Eleanor, donate. Inside, my wedding album, Paul's Navy medals, my grandmother's china. Packed like trash. In David's home office, spreadsheets tracking Phase 1, acquisition, Phase 2, Reno and flip. My name headed the list. Projected profit on my house alone, $780,000 after commissions. Worst discovery: forged medication consent forms from Phoenix General extending my ICU stay by 9 days. The signature looked like mine, because it was traced. The cardiologist testified under subpoena. The post-op infection was unusually aggressive. We never understood why the antibiotics failed so quickly. Lab retests on saved samples showed trace contaminants consistent with deliberate introduction. Attempted something. Karen was arrested at the airport trying to board a flight to Cancun. David turned himself in the next morning. The federal indictment came down hard. Wire fraud, money laundering, elder financial abuse, conspiracy, healthcare fraud. Karen faced the heaviest charges, 22 counts. Her family had run similar schemes in 3 states. David took a plea early, 5 years, reduced to 3 with full cooperation. He testified against Karen and her cousin the appraiser. In the sentencing hearing he looked 20 years older. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he turned to me in the gallery. "Mom. I told myself it was for our future. For the baby we were trying for. I told myself you'd never know. That you'd be taken care of. I was wrong. I was weak. And I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Some apologies arrived too late to repair the damage. Karen received 15 years. Her cousin got 11. The refinance company lost its license. Several executives were indicted separately. The house was returned to me free and clear. The equity line was voided. Most of the stolen money was recovered through forfeiture. It took 4 months to erase them. New locks. New security system. New curtains. I chose soft blue linen, the color Paul loved. I replanted the garden. The jacaranda tree still bloomed. I started a small support group for elder financial abuse survivors. We met in my living room once a month. Coffee, cookies, stories that sounded too similar. Mrs. Alvarez moved in with her niece. She sends postcards. David writes from prison. Monthly letters. No excuses anymore, just descriptions of the prison library, the GED classes he teaches, the shame he carries. I read them. I don't always answer. My grandson, born 6 months after the arrests, visits with David's sister, my niece. He calls me Nana. He likes Paul's old recliner. I bought a new one. 2 years later. The house is mine again. Quieter. Safer. I sit on the porch most evenings watching the jacaranda petals fall like purple rain. David is in a halfway house now. He'll be paroled next spring. He asked if he could visit. I said yes, but only in the garden. Not inside. Not yet. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a slow unfurling, petal by petal. I expanded Paul's small heart research fund into something bigger, the Hayes Elder Protection Initiative. Free legal clinics, financial literacy classes for seniors, fraud awareness seminars. Every time I speak at one I tell them my story, not for pity. For warning. They moved my hospital bed so they could measure the windows for new curtains. But the curtains are mine again. And so is the view.